'Twas 5 days before Christmas, and Emmett has the week off because he got his hand caught in a drill press and now his wrist is fractured. It sure is a good thing that I just got my Christmas presents wrapped up. Well, figuratively wrapped up, not literally wrapped up. Because if I had waited, then I'm not sure I would have been able to finish them, because fine-tuned finger movements aren't exactly my strong suit right now. Just like last year, I took it upon myself to make specialty gifts for each one of my siblings. Unlike last year, it took me till the middle of November to realize this is what I wanted to do. Since I didn't have that much time, I was really looking for something that I knew would be fairly quick and easy, and the solution that I came up with was three-dimensional posters. I've done it before, once. It didn't take me very long, but it was pretty fun, and I've always wanted to do it again, so that's what I did. There were a lot of, like, recognizable movies or shows or whatever from the past year that each one of my siblings kind of gravitated towards. So I picked a moment, or a poster, or whatever, from those media presentations, and I set about making a physical representation of them. Ow! I can't point. I'm not gonna try to hold this with my left hand. The first one I made was Good Morning Goldie. I was going to make it complete with a Good Frickin' Morning Goldie side, but I did that one first, and I kept messing up. I knew that that was a possibility. That's why I wanted to risk it on the frickin' morning side, because I thought if it works out, then you'll just have the option of the censored or not censored. And if I do mess up, then I can just paint over it, and no one's the wiser unless they watch this video. This one was technically the simplest to make, but like I said, I did mess up a lot. The first time, I did not seal the picture that I used, so the resin kind of ruined it. It didn't look terrible, it just was hard to see. It was very murky and kind of ripply, like you could tell like it had gotten kind of water damaged. And then when I was like gluing down all the stuff, it didn't all get on right. It kind of ended up floating a little bit. Oh yeah, and the lettering. The lettering was really hard. My original plan, I wanted it to be like a golden rope calligraphy kind of look. So I was trying to use yarn. I drew out with a marker how big I wanted the letters to be, but it was really hard to follow that with the yarn, just gluing it down with hot glue. I had tried to erase my permanent marker guide, but it didn't get fully erased. You could still see permanent marker marks. And then the resin soaked into parts of the yarn, but not other parts. So some of it was light and some of it was dark, and it was really hard to read. So obviously I just painted over it because it didn't look very good. So with this side, I did everything. I need to stop trying to point. Just keep my fingers. I'm gonna have to tape my fingers up or something so that I don't try to point. I did everything right. Except, you know, break my wrist. But I didn't do that while working on this project. I did that at work. Another fun thing is that this was actually made with a resin kit that was gifted to me by my sister-in-law, whom this is meant for. Last Christmas, you gave me some resin, and the very next year, I soaked Ryan Reynolds' face in it. It's a little lopsided because I wasn't thinking about keeping everything level. Or the problem is that when I glued a piece of cardboard into kind of a mold, and I wasn't thinking about if that was level, so then I realized that it was tilted slightly, and then when I realized that, I tried to, like, prop up one side to tilt it back, but then that just made it kind of lopsided. And trying to get the cardboard off was a big kerfuffle. Kerfuffle's not the right word. It was an ordeal. That's the right word. I knew that the resin was probably going to soak into the cardboard, but I didn't think it would be that hard to get off. Nah, it was. Took a lot of grinding, took a lot of sanding. I haven't had to cover the edges in more resin just to make sure that the sides were smooth instead of all covered in scuff marks and things like that. But that actually works pretty well. Like if you sand resin and it takes the shine off of it, you can just mix up a small batch of resin, use a paintbrush that you don't want anymore, and you can just paint the resin back on, and it'll like smooth up the sides. So that worked pretty well. Oh yeah, and most of the time I was using a hair dryer to try and get all the bubbles out. That didn't work very well. What did work better was a heat gun, but it's my dad's heat gun. I'm still just borrowing it, and he needed it for a while, so I wasn't using it. That's why there's so many bubbles. But once I got that back, that made the bubbles go away very quickly. Anyway, whoop. I need to put this down before I drop it or before I hurt myself. I mean, I already hurt myself, but you know what I mean. Very random note. Has anyone noticed a lack of Cranberry Ginger-Ale? This is Cherry 7-Up. It's good. I like it. It makes me nostalgic. But I really love Cranberry Ginger-Ale. Where's my frickin' Cranberry Ginger-Ale? It normally is all over the place over the holidays. Grocery stores, Walmart, whatever. I haven't found it. Where is it? Am I alone in this? Did it get discontinued? I don't know. Bum, 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 bum. I guess in a similar turn of events as with the resin, for my birthday, my sister gave me a Batman poster. So I decided to pay it forward and make her a Batman poster. A three-dimensional kind of Batman poster. This one was probably one of the simpler ones to make. The tricky thing is just figuring out how many layers I want to do, because there is a bit of like variety you can go for here. It just all depends on how much you want to stack up. The way I do it, I start by I print off the poster on regular paper. I trace it onto cardstock. I usually do a couple versions, sketching out all the details I want, and then I'll cut all of those details out and then trace that onto foam. And very meticulously stack up each layer of foam piece by piece until it looks pretty cool. It took a lot of layers of foam to get the smoke right. I wanted that like sticking out. And it's hard to see when it's like a dark, because like if you're just drawing, you can use kind of the dark spaces, but if you're making something physical, I kind of need to know what's in those dark spaces, just so I can have some kind of detail. So I fudged a little bit with this arm here. It's really hard to see on the poster, but I knew the way his suit looks, he needed to have an arm there, so I went ahead and put these arm pieces on, even though you can't really see them, but I needed more three-dimensional detail. I can't remember if I really had any more notes. I guess I could review the footage. Oh yeah, painting was kind of... Well, painting wasn't too complicated, actually. It's just... I can't lift it up. Paint it black and then red. I tend to make things too complicated for myself with the painting. All of these had like a pretty complicated painting process, and it doesn't need to be that complicated. It's just shading. It's get your shading right. I did use some skin-colored foam, mostly just for myself to know that's his face. But really, since all of it just turned out black and red, I didn't need to use skin-colored foam because it would just get painted up anyway. But it doesn't matter because it got painted up anyway. I'm trying to remember, have I heard someone reference that red is not hard to cover up, but it's like it's hard to cover up things with red? I can't remember if I've heard that for sure, but it sure sounds accurate after dealing with this because it took a lot of red in order to bring the red back on top of the black. When I put the lips on Batman, I was worried that that one detail was going to throw it off at first because I didn't want it to stick out too far. It worked out pretty well, but I was still like, okay, thankfully it worked out pretty well because that could have gone awry. Despite that feeling, I went ahead and put a lot more detail into the next one, which is Johnny Lawrence from Cobra Kai. Did that one for my brother Wyatt. He's a pretty big Cobra Kai fan. I don't think I've ever heard him say that Johnny is his spirit animal, but I know I've heard him say that of other characters that he likes, so I'm gonna go out on a limb and say Johnny is one of many spirit animals. You know, colloquially. The face actually worked! It was the same process. I sketched it, cut out all the pieces, then just started layering up the foam one by one. But halfway through, when I just had the face on, I didn't have the hair on, none of it was painted, I told my sister that, like, well, at least Handsome Squidward is a step up from Picasso? Because it really looked like Handsome Squidward at one point. I mean, again, it could be worse, but it didn't look quite right until I had all the details on. The shading on the face finally worked out. That was another thing I had to go back and forth on, because skin tones are tough, you know? And the background. I struggled with the background, too. I didn't know what to do. I thought about leaving it plain. I was trying to, because the picture that I was basing this off of had like a room ambience. I was trying to emulate the room ambience. But I noticed that, like, it's dark on this side and light on this side, but then the highlights on his face are reversed. That confused me a little bit, but I guess maybe it creates kind of a contrast. Hopefully it looks good. I mean, because that's the way it was shot. It was a still from the movie. It's the gif of him just like, yeah. So that's the way it looked in the show. So that's what I copied. But it was hard to get that contrast right of knowing how much detail to put in the background and how much to just leave plain. Obviously, this is what I ended up with. Then I just painted everything till I was happy with it. Then put a layer of Mod Podge on it to seal it. Was this the one I scuffed up? I scuffed them up with a Scotch-Brite because, like, I want to seal my paint jobs, but I don't always like the way that the sealer looks, whether it's Mod Podge or clear coat spray sealer. It's like normally you weather something to make it not look plasticky, and then if you seal it afterwards, then it just looks plasticky. But I scuff it up with a Scotch-Brite, and that helps take out the shine a little bit. I'm sorry I bumped you. This one's going to be the hardest one to hold up, because last but certainly not least, how am I gonna hold... Okay, prop it up on my knee. Prop it out. Andor. And it glows. Oh, that looks good. That looks good. That looks almost better on the camera screen than it does in real... I mean, because it catches all the glowing, doesn't it? This thing became so much bigger than I ever intended. Because it started out just, okay, I know Tucker likes Andor, so I'll make an Andor poster. And then I thought, oh, I should... Here, let me... Where was I? I wanted to make Andor poster. Then I thought I should paint the eye above it because the eye is really cool. And then I realized that painting something that flashy may not really work because I always have trouble with getting my paints to like be bright. They always look kind of muted. So then I thought, could there be a way to make it light up? Well, sure, there's a way. I can soak lights in resin. So I ordered some more resin. I ordered some fairy lights, and I just sunk the fairy lights into resin. I made a mold out of foam. I don't know if mold is the right word. And I made sure that it was the foam that like I was going to end up using because I knew how hard it is to get the molding off of it. My original plan was actually to like put it down and like have that be the top, but then I realized that it would work better if the side that was exposed was the top, because that way I could put on more extra resin, and that way like if it gets stuck to the paper that I had on the bottom, because I had wax paper on the bottom, so if it gets stuck to that, then that wouldn't work as the surface layer that's exposed. So yeah, that was the main kind of change in the plan a little bit. I sanded in a bunch of little streaks to hopefully reflect the light a little more. Oh yeah, and while I was mixing up the resin, this time I used the hairdryer on purpose because it does pop some of the small bubbles, but then it actually makes some of the bigger bubbles kind of clump up and it doesn't pop them. I did that on purpose here to try and add like some atmospheric effects to, what's the word? Tucker's gonna get mad at me. Diffuse! I knew it was like a camera term that he uses for lighting and stuff like that. I wanted there to be some diffusion for all the lights to reflect off of in different ways. And it turned out pretty good. And it was really complicated to get the backing on here because the wire came out the top because, like I said, I went with the other side than I was intending. So originally I wanted the downside to be the front, and I was going to have all the wiring come out the back, but then I reversed it, so I quick moved the wire so that it would just come out the top, and then I just had to string it back here. That was the main thing that I wasn't expecting. I was not expecting it to be this thick because the resin only goes in so deep, but then I needed room. Oh, lift it up. I needed room for the battery pack, right? That thing's pretty thick, so I had to put on several layers of foam, and that made this whole thing really big. This was also complicated to figure out, because at one point I didn't think I wanted it to be sticking out that far, and also because I realized that it's hard to get to with the latches. So I was just going to leave it open, and I tried to make my own little flap. I did have a flap. I put Velcro on it so that it would open and close. I even cut out a little button for the button. I'm going to go ahead and turn that off. And it was working pretty well. It looked a little cheesy. It looked obviously homemade, but it was functional. And then I realized that, A, it blocks the remote, because there's also a remote for it, and B, in making the lid, I ended up putting extra foam on here, and then that ended up making it thick enough that I would have room for this lid to close, so it just kind of defeated its own purpose. So I ended up taking all that off because I thought it was getting in the way, and then that way, like, I was able to build up some foam behind it so that you can get to the latches to open it up. And like I said, the remote works if you're pointed at the back, which hopefully I can seat myself in such a way so that when Tucker unwraps it, then I can like hit the button on the remote while he's holding it up to look at it. Don't clench. But yeah, if not, then you can just hit the button and just count how many times you hit it depending on the settings, because there's different settings. And on the remote you can just hit the button for the setting you want, but on here you have to click it a bunch of times. Hopefully that didn't just freak it out. No, it's working. Okay. Also, why is the button getting sticky? Probably because I had it taped up. But masking tape doesn't normally make things sticky. I don't know. I might have to cover that with something because I don't like the sticky feeling. But yeah, practice does make perfect, because I say this is probably the best face of the three between Batman, Johnny, and Andor. Like, that face turned out really well. I'm happy with that. That was also, like, I tried to keep the paint job simple, and I was able to keep it pretty simple. I'm proud of myself that I stuck to the plan. I mean, the metallic paint job was actually probably more complicated than the painting the face, because of all the layers of, like, trying to make it look dirty, but then also trying to make it look shiny. At one point, I considered redoing the whole thing and just trying to make it look more of a plain black, but at that point, I was like, I'd done all this work to make it look metallic, so I'm just going to keep kind of that scuffed chrome look. But yeah, I wanted it to look weathered and dirty, like a hologram tablet that you might actually see in the Star Wars universe, maybe. I don't know. What type of technology do they have? I thought they used just holograms, but then in Andor they have Skype. Is Skype still a thing? Is Skype a thing? Because I remember that always used to be the thing. It was just Skype, nothing else. But then now I'm like, oh, video calling is just everywhere, and it's been a long time since I've heard the word Skype. I don't know. It doesn't matter that much. It's just a wall decoration, except it's way too heavy to hang on your wall. Everything else, no, not the resin. Anything with resin is too heavy to hang, so it's more of like you prop it up somewhere on a shelf. The other two, I wanted it to hang. Or you can prop it up. You can do whatever you want. You can prop it, you can hang it. It's your gift. Talking to the people that I'm giving it to, not the rest of you, just ignore this part. It's your gift. You can display it however you want. Or if you don't want to display it, you can stick it in a drawer somewhere. I don't know. Just, your choice. That's what I did for Christmas before I broke my wrist. Thank you for watching, and have a happy new year. And healthy wrists. So to explain that intro a little bit, I was boring holes in angle iron on the drill press, so, like, moving the wheel, making the drill bit going down. And I had old gloves on. I normally try to make gloves last as long as I can, so even when they get holes and the seams start to fall apart, I'll, like, tape up all the fingers to keep them together and stuff like that. I'm thinking what happened, because I wasn't really paying attention, which is part of the problem, but I'm thinking, because you want to oil the bit so that it doesn't overheat, but sometimes if you put too much oil on it, it'll drip down onto the piece and it makes it hard to see the mark a little bit. So I had the drill on, I was lowering it, and I think I went to wipe off some of the oil, but one of those taped up fingers got caught on the edge of the drill bit, and it sucked me around. All I really remember is being pressed against the side of the press and desperately trying to reach for the off switch. All while doing a surprisingly chill impression of Laura Dern from Jurassic Park.